Our world is becoming more and more chaotic. Part of this chaos stems from the heightened ease at which individuals have the capacity to use and access online platforms. However, the extent to which this is happening is becoming problematic. Therefore, we are questioning if we are ready and equipped enough to deal with this, to try and gain a better grasp on the constantly changing world that we are interacting with today. We would like to explore the significance of digital testimonies as they are altering the way that witnessing and testifying are being done. Digital testimonies are a protocol for truth making, yet through this, the power that is given to the production of them has the potential to create different narratives and forms of validation that are at risk of being harmful through the possibility of a unified format of attesting to events. Additionally, digital testimonies run the risk of potentially creating protocols of testimony and witnessing that desensitize the issues that are being documented. We will argue that whilst digital testimonies create a platform that allows for a larger database of witnessing and testimony, that this in turn amplifies and enhances the problems with testimonies. This will be explored through a discussion on the issues of testimony in the digital age of the Ukraine war, monitoring and production in the eyes of the law, and inclusivity and representation.
In the first year of the Ukraine war, the Berlin-based NGO Mnemonic gathered over 3 million records of evidence documenting Russia's war crimes against Ukrainian civilians on their own territory. All of these were digital, marking the highest number of virtual evidence obtained by the charity in a year for any war. There has been a clear upwards trend in the level of online evidence produced documenting wartime atrocities or potential human rights violations with the arising of social media, a new form of space as flow, constantly shifting and adapting of each new piece of content on its site. This widespread and accessible form of space is typically released as short, dramatic clips, which are easily understood no matter what one's language or background is, due to the heavy audiovisual content within it. The sound of gunfire, bombs exploding, or the cries for help are universally recognized signs, oftentimes accompanied by an emotional narration or heavy music. Picture the sound you imagine looking at our example on the poster. In doing so, we believe digital testimonies empower a much more widespread group of people to submit evidence and document the war crimes happening to them, recognized by the Ukrainian government by the numerous self-reporting schemes they have for civilians to upload evidence that could potentially be used in the ICC, or International Criminal Court. By adding an audiovisual component on top of the narrative testimony alone, the lines become blurred between eyewitnessing and flesh witnessing, as denoted by Noah Harari. Although viewers are not physically present or able to suffer the same wounds to their flesh, they are subject to the same psychological horrors by experiencing the testimony through the lens of the recorder. Rather than only hearing about the event through decontextualized, isolated news reports or court testimonies taking place long after the events have occurred, like the BBC image of the Ukraine war on the bottom right, the viewer is forced to engage with and encounter the horrors of war. Alongside directly uploaded citizen testimony, there's been an explosion of short-form Reels content, particularly over the pandemic. Courts were not entirely unprepared for the proliferation of social media evidence. However, they did not expect the scale both at which content is being produced and how digital technologies are evolving.
As digital testimonies have widened the target audience, we believe the process of witnessing itself has undergone changes. It is no longer done just to produce legal evidence, but the multitude of target audiences complicates the process as motives behind testifying differ, changing the way they are represented. The 5 AM coalition in Ukraine is collating evidence of the war to not only secure justice by providing evidence of potential war crimes, but also in a way to influence the mass media's reports on the war to gather international support. The scaling up of digital testimonies can then create issues for courts. Key information can become lost in the magnitude, and discrepancies arise, causing large amounts to be invalidated. Varying audiences then raise questions around the reliability of the data. A key issue raised surrounds the challenges of bias and misrepresentation of digital accounts, manipulating the events to support their own narrative. The rapid advancement of digital technology also raises risk of the falsified production of testimony through the use of deepfakes and staging scenes and editing them into different locations. Therefore, in order to remain legally admissible, there's a growing requirement to ensure that mass-produced digital testimonies meet certain witnessing standards. Investigating war crimes requires a much stricter method of witnessing and testifying compared to providing emotive evidence for the media to gather international support. To testify against a war crime in Ukraine, a witness must provide photo or videographic evidence, and their verbal account alone is not sufficient. We think this is significant in changing the way testifying is done. Historically, a witness stands up in court and recollects the event. Now, if someone witnesses something but is unable to record it, their testimony will be rejected, raising questions of access and representability of digital testimonies. To ensure that the submitted data then meets acceptable standards to be used in court, the Berkeley Protocol is being adopted worldwide to create consistent digital testifying standards. People in Ukraine are being trained to collect, preserve, and verify digital evidence, and guidelines are given to those witnessing the events to ensure that evidence can be admissible. This includes filming in all 360 degrees and to identify local landmarks for spatial verification. Questions then remain on the impacts of the freedom of testimony, as people are being forced to fit their own experiences into a set of predefined criteria. This is similar to issues raised in the Nuremberg trials. This is without mentioning safety issues if people are filming from hidden areas, and it raises questions on if their digital testimony will be accepted or not.
A plethora of contemporary academia comments on the increased inclusivity that digital testimonies provide to witnesses and those who have experienced trauma. For instance, simply put, digital testimonies open up many more pathways that a witness can be accessed, namely video, audio, and text. Further to this, many more channels can show and share digital testimony, such as social media platforms, news networks, and online forums, all of which increase accessibility for witnesses, interviewers, researchers, and prosecutors. Predominant positive implication of this increased inclusivity is that with less restrictive access to these testimonies, more people can share and listen, and as such, it is more likely that a wider affected population will be represented. Indeed, while each individual's account may hold less weight in a broader discourse, with improved accessibility, there is less likely to be less trauma involved with recounting a traumatic experience, unlike court-held testimonies that require reliving. This has a compounding impact in which more people are likely to feel safe sharing and testifying, as such only further increasing inclusivity. Furthermore, these digital testimonies are global and non-locally restrictive, which implies that testimony can be shared from war zones and hazardous areas, something that was previously seen as impossible. This can increase the scenario inclusivity, allowing for the involvement of spatial, environmental, and time-specific emotive testimony. This not only means greater contextual significance in testimony, but it also allows for testimony of the dead, giving representation to those most deeply affected by the Ukraine war. From an opposing standpoint, there are limitations to these digital testimonies, namely in the form of lowering individual representation, as compiled mass-collected testimonies will hold less individual significance. This leads to each representation holding less power within a legal proceeding, for example, in some cases leaving witnesses that have surrendered their trauma as less valuable in making a difference. Lastly, rights associated with these testimonies lowers the accountability of this form of representation. In terms of rights, academic discourse seeks to question the ownership of these testimonies and the rights that these individuals have in terms of the way they are being represented in a legal proceeding. For example, is their testimony being used in the intended way, and is the intended message being heard? This factor also extends to implications around legal accountability of represented individuals. Does the prosecution have rights to hold these witnesses accountable if needed?
In conclusion, digital testimonies have had a significant impact on the documentation and presentation of war crimes. They have enabled countless more people to submit and witness testimonies. Thus, they have the potential to help prevent and trial war crimes. However, it definitely has its limitations. One of the main concerns is authenticity. The rapid development of technology has made evaluating authenticity increasingly challenging. There are concerns over post-production editing or manipulation of footage. Reliability is another concern. Digital testimonies are subject to bias and misrepresentation, as people may manipulate events to support a certain narrative. Additionally, the sheer amount of evidence produced may result in key information being lost. Furthermore, digital testimony raises a set of questions over the ownership of these testimonies and the rights these individuals have in the representation in legal proceedings, and whether creators can be held accountable by the prosecution. The creation of the Berkeley Protocol is a notable step in maximising the potential of digital testimonies. However, more work needs to be done to ensure these testimonies can be a reliable and valid source of evidence. Overall, we believe that digital testimonies have notable benefits as they provide a voice to a wider group of people, and they have the potential to hold so many more people accountable to crimes, thus helping to protect human rights. However, their limitations must be addressed, and as technology evolves, it is important that we continue to address challenges to ensure their effective use in legal trials.